Okay, good morning to everybody. We have to go on through the topics we started yesterday. That means we have to discuss about the vehicle which is the most used in Europe to invest in private equity. This vehicle is called closed-end fund. Just to remember the summary of 1-2 minutes about the content of yesterday. Yesterday we discussed about, you remember, the vehicles we can find in the Banking Act, okay? In the Banking Act you find two different vehicles from, I can say, a legal and theoretical point of view you can use to invest in private equity, and the two vehicles are named bank and investment firm. We discussed about, take care about the common characteristics of the two vehicles and the difference. The most important difference is that in the investment firm you don't have special constraints related to equity investment like in the bank. In the bank, you remember, we have to apply a matrix in which you have to compare the size of your equity investment and the size of your portfolio of equity investment with the regulatory capital and also with the capital of the company in which you invest, with special cases which are France and Germany. Take care because about investment firm we highlighted three different groups of investment firm. You remember 106, 107 and 122. Just to remember the relevance, the weights of volume of activities of these two vehicles in Europe, bank more or less represent the 10% of volume of private equity in Europe. On the contrary, investment firm represented 35% of volume of private equity in Europe. That means, okay, investment firms are more important than bank in investing in private equity, but the most important vehicle we have to look for inside the Financial Services Act. Yesterday we discussed about the framework of the Financial Services Act. We gave a definition of financial services and we highlighted the three different vehicles we can find in the Financial Services Act, which are financial services company, asset management company and funds. For us and for our course is relevant to discuss about asset management company and funds, where the asset management company is the only vehicle in Europe that can manage a fund. So a fund can be managed only by an asset management company. For this reason, we have to understand everything about the functioning of asset management company and fund, where, please remember, fund can be open and closed-end. For our course and for the topic of private equity, obviously the concept of fund which is relevant for us is the concept of closed-end fund, okay? And discuss about the reason of this situation. You remember the roadmap and the steps we identified yesterday to understand the functioning of asset management company and fund. It's fundamental to understand three different issues. The issue number one, to understand everything about the asset management company. Second, to understand everything about the closed-end fund. Last, to understand everything about the linkage and the relationship between the asset management company and the closed-end fund, where linkage and relationship means the financial and the economic relationship. That means, okay, we have to understand how it's possible to generate and to share profit and revenues between the closed-end fund and the asset management company. Yesterday, we discussed about the three main characteristics of the asset management company. You remember, very, very simple but quite important. It's mandatory to have a capital of 1 million euros and you must have a business plan. Why you must have a business plan? Because you have to go to the supervisor and you need for an approval. Okay? If you don't have the approval, you cannot start your activity. If you have the approval, you can start, And in Europe, please remember that the fundamental concept is home country control. When you have the approval, you can work in whatever country in Europe, where Europe, 32 countries, please remember, and you are supervised by the first supervisor that gave to you the approval, okay? Please remember the game of moral suasion. Second, if you have the approval, it's fundamental that you have a well-designed corporate governance and you have managers enough to manage the asset management company. Also in this case, the track record, the profile, the honor of directors and managers are evaluated by the supervisor, and also in this case there is a game of moral suasion. The last rule you must follow, you must apply a commitment rule. Commitment rule is fundamental for every fund the asset management company launches in the market. Please remember, a minimum investment is required by the asset management company. That means in every fund, the asset management company must invest at least the 2%. So it's a rule of commitment, to create commitment between the asset management company and the investor. Okay? Okay, guys? A last remarks, sorry, because for me it was obvious, but obvious things sometimes I forget to tell. Yesterday, take care, I didn't talk about the characteristics or constraints for the shareholders of the asset management company. Why I forget it? The answer is very simple, because we don't have any constraints and we don't have any rule. That means shareholders of an asset management company can be everybody. Banks, yes. A bank can have the 100% of shares of an asset management company. Insurance company, yes. Corporations, it's okay. Private individuals, perfect. Public authorities, it's okay. So no constraints, no rules for the shareholders. That's quite important, because when we will discuss about the strategies of private equity company in the next step of our course, considering the shareholders of the asset management company, you will find different stories, different strategies of private equity. Let's imagine, if the asset management company is owned by a bank, probably, in your opinion, the closed-end fund will invest in which cluster? If the asset management company is owned by a bank, the closed-end fund will invest? Guys, you have to come back to the lesson 2 and 3 when we discuss about the managerial involvement of private equity. If the asset management company is owned by a bank, probably the closed-end fund will invest in seed? No. For what reason? Because of specific requirements. Probably if the asset management company is owned by a bank, will invest in expansion and will invest in merger acquisition, in acquisition financing, okay? On the contrary, if the asset management company is owned by two managers that were previously two consultants, probably the asset management company will manage closed-end fund that will invest in turnaround, it's okay, seed, startup, clustering, which is more relevant, the professional network of the shareholders. So take care, because shareholders of the asset management company really have an impact on the strategies of the closed-end fund itself. Okay? Okay? Sorry, we have time to discuss it in the next areas, in the next part of our course, but in Europe we find 3 different groups of asset management company. Asset management company owned by the banking system, asset management company owned by corporations, and asset management company owned by professionals. this last group is always called independent asset management company. Okay? Is it okay? That means Stefano and another colleague that work for 30 years in the biotech sector, we decided to create our asset management company to promote closed-end fund that invest in seed and startup because of our tremendous network and knowledge of some specific sector. Okay? Questions about it? It's okay?
So if a bank owns an asset management company,
Absolutely.
does the constraint still apply?
No constraint.
Even the concentration cap?
No. Because these constraints are for equity investment. In this case, you don't invest in equity. You invest in another financial institution. You understand? A bank can have the 100% of share of an asset management company because the asset management company is a financial institution, right? And a bank has no constraint for equity investment in other financial institution. Okay? A bank can have the 100% of another bank, yes. Of a leasing company, yes. Of a factoring company, yes. Of an asset management company, yes. So no constraint.
Even if it turns around and owns equity itself?
Sorry?
Even if the asset management company?
Absolutely, absolutely. This is not a contradiction, you understand, because you can invest 100% of the asset management company because this is not an industrial activity, it's a financial activity, yes. As a consequence, the asset management company, as a consequence, has to invest the 2% in the closed-end fund. But take care, because your question is quite important. A bank is also free to invest in whatever kind of closed-end funds, okay? Because this is not equity investment. You invest in a closed-end fund, and that's it. You don't have any constraint. Okay, guys? Questions about it? It was a quite important question coming from your colleague. Other questions? Is it okay? Is it okay, guys? Let's move to closed-end funds. You remember that we are working on this very simple scheme. 0 and investment exit. You remember? We are working on this scheme. You remember yesterday? What we mentioned is, okay, we have to understand the functioning of a closed-end fund. So we have to understand the general framework of functioning of a closed-end fund. And to understand the general framework is fundamental to understand the life of a closed-end fund. We started from the beginning. The beginning is called fundraising time, fundraising period, because you remember that when we launch a closed-end fund, we need a specific approval coming from the supervisor. Approval means the supervisor gives us the approval to launch a closed-end fund with a certain size, with a certain focus on some specific clusters. In the very day in which we have the approval, start the fundraising time, and we have 1 year and a half to collect money. As you remember yesterday, this is a tremendous game because it's a game of reputation, okay? It's a tremendous because the stronger you are, the shorter must be the time you have to use to collect money. On the contrary, if you spend a lot of time, it's a demonstration that you don't have a reputation, and it became very hard for you to get to the size. You had the permission, the approval coming from the supervisor. So it's really a tremendous game. We mentioned that more or less the 50% of closed-end funds are not able to get to the final size in Europe. But obviously, they don't wait for 1 year and a half. Generally, after 2-3 months, if the managers of the asset management company feel that it's not possible to get to the size, they give a call to the supervisor and they say, it's better that we stop. Okay? In the moment in which you get to the size, that moment is the time 0. okay? In the exact moment in which you get to the size, this very moment is the time zero of the closed-end fund, okay? Questions about it? Is it okay? That's great. Now we have to understand, okay, we stay in the time zero. I want to understand if we have constraints for the size of the fund. And second, I want to understand time n. We have rules, we have a constraint, so I would like to understand more about the size and the time n. Concerning for the size, the answer is very simple, because we don't have any constraint. So it's completely up to you to negotiate the size of the closed-end fund with the supervisor. No constraint, no limits, okay? You remember what I mentioned yesterday, when you fix the size, also in this case, is a tremendous game. Because the bigger is the size, the higher is the impact on the market in terms of reputation, but it's very difficult for you to get to the size. On the contrary, if you launch a very small closed-end fund, let's imagine, I want to launch a closed-end fund of 20 million euros, it's very easy for me to get to the size, but the signal I give to the market is, Stefano Caselli decided to launch a closed-end fund of 20 million euros, you start laughing, and you say, no reputation, it's a nonsense, okay? So to fix the size, it's really a tremendous game. We don't have any constraint. In order that you have an idea about the average size in Europe, the average size in Europe of closed-end fund is 200 million euros. I don't want to say it's the golden size, but it's the average, okay? It's the average size, 200 million euros, in order that you start to remember. In the language of practitioner, we really like to use the definition mega closed-end fund when the size of the closed-end fund is higher than 10 billion euros. It's not written in the law, but is a classical definition coming from the language of practitioners. When the size is higher than 10 billion euros, you do prefer to say it's a mega fund, it's a mega closed-end fund. The average size, 200 million euros. Okay? Take care. The higher is the size, the higher must be the amount of money, remember, that the asset management company has to invest. So it's a constraint. If the asset management company has no money, I'm very sorry, you cannot launch a mega fund, because you don't have money to do that. So take care about this constraint, because it's not easy. Obviously, this constraint is not important for asset management companies which are managed by banks. If the shareholders are banks, for a bank it's not a problem. But if the asset management company is owned by private individuals, by professionals, to follow, to apply the rule of commitment sometimes is very hard, because the shareholders are simply private individuals. So take care about it. So size, no constraints. And second, time n. We have rules, we have constraints, we have only a limit, and the limit is that the maximum duration of the closed-end fund is 30 years. So this is the maximum. Max 30 years. The average duration in Europe is 10 years, okay? It's not simply the average, is the most common duration in Europe. So it's very hard in Europe to find duration which are higher than 10 years, very difficult. Lower than 10, shorter, sorry, than 10 years, very difficult. The golden duration in Europe of closed-end fund is 10 years. Sometimes we find 12 years. Very difficult to find other duration. Not by law, but coming from the usage of practitioners and implicit rules in the market. Is it okay? So 10 years is the typical duration. Why 10 years? Guys, remember that closed-end fund is a quite smart idea, but investors give money to the fund, and for 10 years they cannot use their money. You understand? Probably it's very difficult to find investors that say, okay, I give to you money for 15 years and I cannot use. That's the reason why probably 10 years is a good compromise between the time the asset management company needs to invest in private equity and the time which is reasonable for investors for not using money. That's the reason 10 years probably it's a good compromise. Okay? Questions about it? Now we stay in time zero and we want to understand, okay, what's going on? The first problem is, in the time zero, all the investors give money to the fund. From a logical point of view, you can say, yes, it's time zero. You promised me money, and in time zero, you have to give. So if I manage a closed-end fund of 200 million euros, this evening, I have in cash 200 million euros. But this solution is not so efficient. For what reason? Because my business is private equity. If I have 200 million euros in cash, I need probably 1 year, 1 year and a half, 2 years to invest this amount of money, okay? Because it's private equity. It's not public equity in which I sit on the desk and I start to invest your money. You understand? I have to look for potential targets. I have to negotiate with companies. Generally, a closed-end fund spends between 1 year and a half and 2 years to invest the whole amount of money. Okay? For this reason, investors don't give the whole amount of money in time zero, but we fix a maximum time that asset management company can use to call for the so-called drawdowns. Drawdowns are percentage of the commitment promised by the investor. Okay? That means your name is Daniele. Okay, if Daniele promised to me in the fundraising 20 million euros, in time zero I say, dear Daniele, we write a contract in which we say in 2 years maximum, you have to give to me 20 million euros. The rule is very simple. Today, you give to me the 10% of money you promised, 2 million euros. We sign an agreement in which, in whatever moment, I can give to you a call, and you have 5 days or maximum 10 days to give another percentage of the investment. Okay? It's the so-called rule of drawdowns. Okay? The percentage is obviously the same for all the investors. That means today, the investors, you give to me the 10% of your investment, you sign an agreement, after 3 months I give to you a call and I say, dear investors, please give me other 10% of your investment. And in 5 to 10 days, you have to give to me the 10% of your investment. The maximum time coming by the law is 2 years. After 2 years, the whole amount of money is given by the investors. Is it okay? You understand that it's a more efficient solution, because otherwise, if you give to me money, we have to insert your money in a deposit, and we need a lot of time. In this case, I call money investment after investment, and also for you is more efficient. It's efficient for me, but is efficient especially for the investors. Okay? Is it okay, guys? That's great. We stay in the year's number 2, and now the closed-end fund is working. That means the closed-end fund is investing money, is exiting from the company. We hope a lot of capital gains. What I want that you understand and remember is that between 0 and n, investors have no rights and they have no possibility to interact with the asset management company, okay? That means it's obvious we organize a lot of meetings. You will give me a call every day to know, dear Stefano, how is going on? Okay? Because you are afraid to lose the whole amount of money you give to me, but you don't have any rights. You understand? Because you give money to me, and for 10 years you have to wait. For this reason, we use a very common label that you have to remember. Private equity is a mutual trust business. Why is a mutual trust business? Because investors must trust in the asset management company, because for 10 years you don't have any rights and any possibility to interact with the managers that manage your money. The only reason why you invest is because you trust, you strongly trust in Stefano Caselli. No other reason. Okay?
Why do you say it's a mutual-sided trust? It's just one-sided.
Is a mutual trust because from one side investor must trust in the asset management company managers, and on the other side asset management company managers perfectly know that they are betting on their reputation. So we use the label mutual trust because from one side you have to trust in Stefano Caselli, and on the other side Stefano Caselli perfectly know that I'm playing with my reputation and I'm using my reputation. If I have some mistake, I destroy completely my reputation. So it's a mutual trust relationship. It's quite important because for 10 years, investor says, dear Stefano, you have to manage our money and we cannot interact with you, okay? Obviously, I repeat, we organize meetings. Every day you give me a call to say, Stefano, how is going on, in which company you are investing? It's obvious, but they are simply informations. You cannot interact with me as a manager of the asset management company, okay? That's the reason why fundraising is very difficult, because I have to convince you to give me money for 10 years. That's the reason why fundraising is tremendous and dramatic, because you have to say, okay, for 10 years we give to you money, okay? No control, no interaction, we have to trust in you, okay? Is it okay, guys? Last, we move to the year N, which is generally the year 10. One of the problems is, guys, this is private equity, so it's very hard that in the year N, that means year 10, the closed-end fund has the whole amount of money in cash. For what reason? Come back to the lesson number 1, okay? No liquidity, no. So it's very difficult that in the year 10 you exit from all the investment, okay? It's very hard. For this reason, the law says, okay, in the last 6 months, asset management company can give a call to the investors, and asset management company can use the so-called extra time. Extra time has a maximum duration of 3 years, okay? Extra time can be used only one time. That means in the last 6 months of the closed-end fund, managers of asset management company give a call to the investors and said, okay, we want to use an extra time for 2 years. You don't have any possibility to say, Stefano, it's a tragedy for us. We cannot. I say, I'm very sorry, this is private equity. I can use an extra time, and you have to wait for other 2 years. Sorry. Why I decided to do that? Because in many cases it's a damage for you. Let's imagine, if I have many investments working in different companies, if I decide to exit, in many cases is a losses for you. And so it's better to wait for another 1 year or 2 years. For example, in 2008 and 2009, many closed-end funds are using extra time. For what reason? Because it is a nonsense to exit from investment in 2009. You understand? So it's better also for the investors to wait for other 2 or 3 years, because it's a nonsense to exit from investment in 2009. So it's a classical example of usage of extra time. Okay? Just to have an idea about the real world, is very, very common that a closed-end fund uses extra time. Okay? It's very common. So that's the story of closed-end fund. Okay? The story of closed-end fund. 3 last remarks which are quite important, so take care. The remark number 1, stupid, but I do prefer to remember. In the time n, or in the time n plus 3, everything can happen. Okay? What does it mean? In many cases, we organize a meeting in this room, and they say, dear investors, we met 10 years ago. You gave to me 200 million euros, and today I'm very happy to say the million euros are 900. Okay, you start laughing, crying, we drink a lot of champagne and so on for 4 hours. Okay, that's great. But I can say, dear investors, you remember we met in this room 10 years ago. You gave to me 200 million euros. I'm very sorry, I work a lot for you, but we stay in bad times, and now the millions are 70. I'm very sorry, okay? We don't drink anything, and it's the last time I manage private equity in my life. Probably it's the last time you invest, but this is private equity, okay? So very stupid remarks, but please remember, because sometimes investors don't remember this very simple issue. And in the common sense of newspaper and practitioner, seems that private equity is a sort of golden tool in which, okay, because of the fact you give money for 10 years to someone, you must have internal rate of return. No, absolutely. It depends from the cluster. You want to have internal rate of return tremendously high, that's great, invest in a closed-end fund in seed financing, but please remember that the most common scenario is that at the end of the closed-end fund, you don't have internal rate of return. Okay? It's not a magic tool. It's a tool which belongs to this world. That means if you want higher return, you must suffer higher risk. And the reason you keep your money for 10 years in a closed-end fund is not a good reason to expect a higher return. No. It's simply the condition, the rule, to stay in this market. Please remember, because sometimes there is a misunderstanding. Many investors say, wow, we invested for 10 years, and you want to have a higher return. No. To invest for 10 years, it's just simply the basic rule to stay in private equity, but it's not related to performance. Second remarks, just to know, more or less in the 90% of cases of closed-end funds, the story is a story of investment in time 0 and is a story of final meeting in time n. Okay? But in the law is written that if you want, where if you want means if the investors want to have it, it's possible to give in advance some revenues to the investors. Okay? That means we can fix that after, is an example, okay? We can fix that after the year 7, if we have revenues, the asset management company can start giving you money, okay? It's possible. It's quite uncommon because more or less only in the 10% of cases it happens. For what reason? Because for you investor is probably a great idea to have money in advance, but if you think for a while, it's not so an efficient solution, because if you have money in advance, you reduce the possibility, the options for the closed-end fund to invest again your money and to multiply the internal rate of return. So most of the investors says, no, we don't want to have money in advance. We want that the money remains in the closed-end funds and you try to multiply the revenues. But sometimes happens that investors would like to have some money in advance, just in order you know. Remark number one. Remark number two, last remarks. The last remarks is not written in the law, but is a very common rule in the market, and you have to know. Let's come back to the fundraising, okay? Let's imagine I launch a fund of 200 million euros, okay? Let's imagine I start a fundraising, you remember, a lot of dinner with potential investor, and I organize a meeting with, your name is?
Oriana.
Oriana. Let's imagine Oriana is a US pension fund, okay? And Oriana says, dear Stefano, your closed-end fund is quite a smart idea. I want to invest in your closed-end funds. And I want to invest 100 million euros. And I say, Oriana, thank you very much. I'm very happy for that. And you say, me too, but we have to negotiate something. Because if Oriana invests 100 million of euros in the closed-end fund of Stefano, what will happen tomorrow morning, in your opinion? There will be the queue of investors that would like to invest in the fund of Stefano, you understand? Because the signal is, wow, an American pension fund decided to invest 100 million of euros in the closed-end fund of Stefano. This is a signal that the closed-end fund is quite good, Stefano is quite smart, and in a couple of minutes a lot of investors start to say, we want to invest in the closed-end fund of Stefano. You understand? For me it's great. Oriana perfectly knows this effect, and Oriana wants to have some benefit from that. What kind of benefits I can give to Oriana? Understand? Because Oriana perfectly understands that is a good signal. And Oriana would like to have benefits. What kind of benefit I can give to Oriana, in your opinion?
Probably to keep her money if she wants.
Sorry?
Probably to keep her money if she wants before time end.
No.
Second thing.
No, absolutely. Sorry. To give money before the time end, it must be a common rule for all the investors. So it's not a special rule for Oriana, absolutely.
So let her know first of all your decisions.
No, all the investors is the same. Because the other investors, take care. If the other investors feels that the relationship between Oriana and Stefano is unfair, no investor decided to invest in the fund or closed-end fund. You have the same rights, okay? So the benefit of Oriana must be fair and reasonable for all the other investors. I can give to Oriana only one benefit, which is fair and which is reasonable for all the other investors.
Maybe Diana can negotiate the investments, the private equity.
No, absolutely. It's completely unfair. Mutual trust business. The asset management company must invest, must manage money, and you don't have any possibility to interact with me. Please take care about that. In the private equity world, if happens that an investor try to put constraints on policy of investment of the asset management company, this is the end of the asset management company, and this is the last time this investor can invest in whatever kind of closed-end fund in the world. Because if Oriana tried to say to Stefano, Stefano, it's better that you invest in this equity, no other closed-end fund in the world would like to have Oriana as an investor. The answer would be, Oriana, thank you very much for your money, you are out of my league. Take care, because there is a sort of peer control in private equity. What I can give to Oriana? I can give a right which is called the right of co-investment, which is the co-investment right. Co-investment right. The co-investment right is very simple. I sign an agreement with Oriana, and all the other investors perfectly know. And in this agreement is written, every time the closed-end fund invests in a company, I have to give a call to Oriana, and I have to say, dear Oriana, tomorrow morning I will invest in the company of Claudio, right, or not? Daniele. Or Daniele is an Italian company working the chemical sector. Tomorrow I will invest 10 million euros. If you want, Oriana, you can invest also your money in the company, and I manage this investment for you. Oriana can say, thank you very much, Stefano, I don't want to invest. But in other cases, Oriana can say, oh, the company of Daniele, that's great. I would like to invest 3 million euros. Dear Stefano, can you please manage this money for me? So for Oriana is a benefit which is not unfair, because I'm completely free, you understand, to manage the money of everybody, but Oriana has a special option, a special benefit to invest together with the closed-end fund. Why is a special benefit? Because Oriana can multiply, obviously, the return coming from the investment in the closed-end fund. Okay? All the other investors perfectly know, and they agree for two reasons. First of all, because it's a golden rule. And in some cases in life, is Oriana that has special benefit. In other cases, it's you that has this special benefit, and so on. So it's a golden rule. Second, minor investors are very happy to have this golden investor, because to have a golden investor or majority investor means that it's a good signal of the quality of the fund. So you are very happy to invest in a closed-end fund where an American pension fund invested at 50% of the money. It's a good signal. And you are very happy for that. Okay, guys? So take care about this fundamental rule of closed-end fund. Questions about it? Is it okay?
You take fees on the extra investment.
Sorry?
Does the private equity fund take fees on the extra investment?
In which sense from the extra investment? Sorry, I don't understand the question, but...
Well, when you say that the golden rule allows the investor to add money,
yeah.
do you take fees on this part of managing this particular money?
The investment of Oriana?
Yeah.
No, I don't take fee. No. Yeah, absolutely. But it's not expensive. For what reason? Because I arrange everything for the investment. Okay, I manage the investment in the company of Daniele, and I simply add money to this investment. So I can say no, it's not so expensive, but it's absolutely for free, absolutely. Okay, guys? Now we have to highlight other 3 different topics concerning the closed-end fund. These are general rules concerning closed-end fund. We have to highlight other 3 topics which are important, not so important like the general framework, but is very important to specify these other 3 topics. I would like to give to you the label, and we start to discuss about these other 3 topics. The topic number 1 is the so-called internal code of activity. The second topic we have to discuss is investment policy. And the last topic is rules for going to public. Okay? Just to come to an end, of the framework of rules concerning the closed-end fund, we have to discuss about other three topics. The topic number one is the topic of internal code of activity. The topic number two is the topic considering investment policy. And last topic, rules for going to public. Let's start from the topic number one, internal code of activity. Every time an asset management company launches a closed-end fund, the asset management company has to write an internal code of activity that must be approved by the supervisor. Every time the asset management company launches a closed-end fund, the asset management company has to write an internal code of activity that must be approved by the supervisor. What is the internal code of activity? The internal code of activity is the body of rules which regulates the activity of the closed-end funds. And in the same time, please remember this definition, the internal code of activity is the manifesto to promote in the market the characteristics of the closed-end fund when you manage fundraising. What we have to write in the internal code of activity? Simply, we have to write all the things, all the characteristics we discussed before. For example, the size of the closed-end fund, the duration, the possibility to give money in advance, and if yes, after which year you can give money in advance, the rules for the drawdowns, and especially an internal code of activity, you have to write the cluster or the clusters in which the closed-end fund invests. Because when you manage fundraising, you have to go in the market and you have to say, okay, dear investors, I want to launch a closed-end fund with a size of 1 billion euros, and my focus is in turnaround financing in Italy. Or I specify that my focus is seed financing in biotech sector in Europe. So internal code of activity is fundamental to highlight and to specify what is the focus and the cluster in which the closed-end fund invests. Obviously, sorry if it is a bit boring, but if the focus is unclear, the supervisor doesn't give to you the approval. Only if the focus is very clear, also with moral suasion game, it's possible for you to go out in the market and to ask for money from the investors. Okay? Is it okay? Please take care, because in the next section, when we'll discuss about US and UK, when you promote private equity, you don't have mommy or daddy supervisor that say, okay, this is the internal code of activity, the size is right, the focus is clear, and so on. You go in the market, and if you find a stupid investor that invests in your vehicle, even though the activity is not clear, it's your responsibility, it's the responsibility of investors, but it's not our problem. In European Union, interaction with the supervisors, okay? I repeat, I don't want to say I'm a supporter of Europe or I'm a supporter of US and UK. I would like simply to highlight the different style, and you must have your personal opinion about it, okay? I don't want to generate bias in the classroom and to say what is my opinion about that. It's not relevant. For me, it's important that you understand the different functioning of different systems. So, internal code of activity. The rule number 2 is investment policy. What does it mean, investment policy, guys? Rules concerning the investment, concerning the portfolio of the closed-end fund. You are free to invest, or you have some constraints, okay? In this case, when we discuss about investment policy, you have to distinguish general rules and specific rules. General rules are written in the Financial Services Act. Specific rules are written in the Internal Code of Activity. Okay? General rules which are written in the Financial Services Act, and they are exactly the same for whatever kind of closed-end fund. Rules are very simple, but please remember, the rule number one, a closed-end fund cannot invest in derivatives. A closed-end fund cannot invest in derivatives. And second, the closed-end fund cannot leverage investment. These are two fundamental rules. You cannot use derivatives and you cannot leverage your investment. That means you give to me 200 million euros, I can use only 200 million euros. I cannot give a call to the banking system and to say, please give us loan to the closed-end fund in order that we have more money to invest. No, we cannot. And we cannot use derivatives. Rule number three, general rules, the maximum size of investment in a company or in a group is the 30% of the size of the fund. So the maximum size of investment in a company or in a group is the 30% of the value of the fund.
It's not even possible to invest in derivatives just for hedging activities?
No, absolutely. No, it's not possible. It's not possible by law. No, it's not possible. If a fund, open-end or closed-end fund, but it's another story, decides to use derivatives and to leverage, the fund must be classified as hedge fund. But it's another story. An hedge fund is a fund both open and closed that can both leverage and using derivatives. But it's not related to our course. Okay? In private equity, closed-end fund cannot leverage and cannot invest in derivatives. And the maximum size of investment in a company is the 30% of the size of the fund. Okay? So if you have a fund of 200 million euros, the maximum investment in a company is 60 million euros. Okay? So general rules are very simple but important. Remember derivatives and leverage, please. Specific rules are written in the Internal Code of Activity. That means specific rules are completely different from a fund to another fund, and specific rules can be whatever kind of rules. Generally, specific rules are related to policy investment into some sectors, constraints to invest in some companies, rule concerning the minimum size of sales of a company in which you invest, and so on. Okay? Just to give you an idea about classical specific rules, for example, in many closed-end funds in Italy, but more or less in France, Germany, you find that in the Internal Code of Activity, the minimum size of a company in which you invest is 30 million euros. That means you say, I cannot invest in a company in which sales are smaller than 30 million euros. And second, you don't invest in the real estate sector. These are examples of specific rules of the investment policy written in the Internal Code of Activity. Okay? But because the Internal Code of Activity is your manifesto, you have to use to promote your fund in the fundraising. In the manifesto, you have to write rules that you imagine can be quite attracting for potential investors. Okay? But when you write, you have to apply this rule. Is it okay, guys? Questions? Last, rules for going to public. This is not quite common, but sometimes it happens. In your opinion, a closed-end fund can be listed in the stock exchange? In your opinion, a closed-end fund can be listed in the stock exchange? From a logical and theoretical point of view? Absolutely, yes. For what reason? Because investors invest in a closed-end fund, they receive a security in which is written, okay, Daniele or Claudio, or we choose another name, so, okay, Daniele, okay, in which is written, Daniele invested 10 million euros in the closed-end fund of Stefano. Do you agree it's a security? It's a security or not? Yes. We can list in the stock exchange? Absolutely yes. We can list it. I don't want to say it's a smart idea or it's a bad idea. I want to say, is it possible? Yes, it's possible. Okay? It's possible to do that. The problem is, I don't want, my name is European Union, to say that you have to list the closed-end fund or not, but I would like simply to fix some rule by which, in some cases, is mandatory to list the closed-end fund in the stock exchange. Okay? I want simply to fix some rules, some limits, by which it becomes mandatory to list the closed-end fund in the stock exchange. These rules are very simple, but please take care. The condition by which you have to list in the closed-end fund in the stock exchange are three. Condition number one, the number of investors in the fund is higher than 100. If you have more than 100 investors, you have to list the closed-end fund in the stock exchange. The average number in Europe of investors is 7. Okay? Second, you must list the closed-end fund in the stock exchange when the value of every investment is lower than 25,000 euros. When the value of every investment, of every security is lower than 25,000 euros, you have to list the closed-end fund in the stock exchange. Just to have an idea, like for the number of investors, please write it, the average size of a security in Europe is 1 million euro. So typically it's not an investment for retail investors, because 1 million euros. Last, you must list your fund in a stock exchange if the size of the closed-end fund is smaller than 25 million euros. If you stay in one of these three conditions, not the three conditions together, but it's enough only one of these conditions, you must list the closed-end fund in the stock exchange. Okay? Condition number one, the number of investors is higher than 100. Average number today in Europe of investors is 7. The minimum investment, that means the value of every security in which you invest in a closed-end fund, is smaller than 25,000 euros. Average size of investment in Europe is 1 million. last, the size of the fund is smaller than 25 million euros, and in Europe the average size is, you have to know, I mentioned before, 200 million euros. So it's enough, only one condition, and you have to list the closed-end fund in the stock exchange. If you don't stay in this condition, you are completely free to list the closed-end fund in the stock exchange if you want. In your opinion, I would like to know your opinion, is it a good idea to list a closed-end fund in the stock exchange or not? Is very common, is uncommon, is a good idea, is a bad idea, for what reasons? First of all, is quite common or is uncommon? Is very, very uncommon. And for what reasons is quite uncommon? Probably because cons are higher than pros. No. The problem is another. No. Because from a certain point of view, it's not a stupid idea. In the closed-end fund, you have to wait for 10 years, right, to exit. If securities are listed in the stock exchange, today I invest, and tomorrow I can sell the securities to another investor. So from a theoretical point of view, it makes sense. But what are the disadvantages? Private equity is a private business which is based on mutual trust and is based on a very, very small club of investors that decided to stay together and to share special business, to have a lot of advantages. If you list the closed-end fund in the stock exchange, you lose this sense of a club, this sense of a small network of investors that decide to give money based on mutual trust to managers to manage this money for 10 years. And it's quite important, in stock exchange, you must have disclosure. That means every day you have to say the company in which you invest, and you lose a lot of advantages, because in private equity, because the investment is private, you have a lot of advantages if nobody knows the target in which you invest, okay? Because if I'm listing in the stock exchange and I say, I want to invest in the company of Daniele, because it's a small jewel, okay? Tomorrow morning, other 100 closed-end funds are in the company of Daniele and they want to invest. On the contrary, I do prefer that there are no disclosure about it. So it's a sort of a contradiction to list in the stock exchange a closed-end fund. It's a contradiction because the highest benefit of private equity are related to a private business. That means a business with no disclosure. Okay? So take care about it. So that's great now. What do you have to do? Now we have to face probably the most interesting part of this story of asset management company and closed-end fund. And the last story you have to discuss is the linkage between the asset management company and the closed-end fund. Where the linkage is, we want to understand what are revenues for asset management company and what are revenues for the investors in the closed-end fund, okay? We have to understand the functioning of this relationship, okay? Especially you have to discover why asset management company guys decided to run a tremendous life. Because let's imagine, Daniele, you want to work with me? Okay, let's imagine Stefano and Daniele decided to launch an asset management company. That means Stefano and Daniele invest their money, okay, 2%. We work for you for 10 years, probably 12 or 13 years, okay? For 13 years, we have a tremendous pressure coming from you, okay? Because every day you give a call to me and Daniele and to say, okay, what are the targets, how is going on, in which company you want to invest, and every day Stefano and Daniele go around in Italy to discover targets of company, we negotiate with company, we sit in the board of directors of the company in which we invest, okay, and we have only 7 days per week and 24 hours, okay? Because private equity is a business which is not based on the desk, You are not a public equity investor, in which, yes, it's stressing, but you stay there and you push buttons, okay? In private equity, you have to go around to negotiate with company, and you have to live in the companies. And if on Sunday an entrepreneur will give us a call and to say we have problems, we have to go there. This is private equity. And the reason is, with the tremendous pressure from you, because we know that if we don't generate internal rate of return, me and Daniele will completely destroy our personal reputation. So or we are crazy, or we have a lot of revenues from this activity, okay? So we want to understand, okay, what is the linkage? What is the functioning of revenues? To understand linkage, revenues, and functioning of the relationship between asset management company and closed-end funds, we have to discover that in the functioning of this system, we have also, because it's mandatory by law, other players. So I would like to write the names of other subjects or other players, and we start to discuss about it. Till now, we simply know that we have investors that invest in a closed-end fund, asset management company manages the closed-end fund, and there is a mutual trust linkage. What are the other players? The other players are three, and these other players are advisory company, technical committee, and custodian bank. So if we want to understand the functioning of the closed-end fund, we will discover that we don't have simply investors, closed-end fund, and asset management company, but we have by law, other three players, which are the advisory company, the technical committee, and the custodian bank. Advisory company, technical committee, and custodian bank. Who is the advisory company? The advisory company is a company which is not related, which is not linked to the asset management company and or to their shareholders, and the mandate, the mission of the advisory company is to provide advisory services to the asset management company, where advisory services means scouting, legal advisory, tax advisory, and advisory negotiation. I repeat, the advisory company is a company which is completely separated by the asset management company. That means, by law, the advisory company has no links with the asset management company and or with the shareholders of the asset management company. What is the goal of the advisory company? The goal of the advisory company is a multiple goal, because the advisory company has to provide a scouting service, legal advisory services, taxation advisory services, and advisory in negotiation. Okay? Advisory company can be whatever kind of players. Just to have an idea, an advisory company can be a bank, an advisory company can be a very famous consulting company, McKinsey, an advisory company can be a small boutique of consultants. Okay, no rules concerning that. Okay? Why is necessary, in your opinion, to have an advisory company by law in a closed-end fund? It's necessary because I want that you remember the story of private equity is the story of Stefano and Daniele, that for 24 hours per 7 days per week for 10 years, they work on private equity. Okay? When we identify a target, we cannot do anything We need an advisor that helps us in which? In the negotiation with the target. We need a legal advisor that provides us legal services, taxation services. So we have to identify an advisory company, okay? And in the internal code of activity, when we promote the business, we have to say, dear guys, our advisory company is McKinsey. Our advisory company is BNP Paribas. Our advisory company is Stefano Caselli and Family Advisor. We don't know who are them, but okay. Like everything in life, if you want a very strong advisor, you have to pay a lot, dear investors. If you want a small advisor, you don't pay a lot, but the contribution of the advisory is not so effective. Please, do your choice, okay? Advisory company. Second, is not enough an advisory company. Every asset management company has to identify a technical committee. The technical committee is not an external player, is an internal player. So technical committee is a committee inside the asset management company. The technical committee provides service in staff with the board of directors of the asset management company. And the role of the technical committee is to give advice to the board of directors, to manage screening of potential targets, to manage network and lobby activity. In other words, technical committee is a committee of wise men, which can enhance the activity of the asset management company. Okay? Just to joke, but to understand. If you invest in a closed-end fund devoted to seed financing, are you happy to have Bill Gates in the technical committee? Yeah, absolutely. If you have Bill Gates in the technical committee, that means you have a big support in terms of networking and lobby, okay? Are you happy for that? Or if you have in the technical committee Mr. Aznar or Mr. Schroeder, are you happy for that? Yes or not? Yeah. For what reason? Because they are quite smart in screening good projects and bad projects. They are quite smart in managing network and lobbying activity, okay? But like everything in life, you want a very strong technical committee, dear investor, you have to pay. And if you pay, I'm very sorry, your internal rate of return is going down. But I cross my finger, also the risk will fall down, okay? If in the technical committee you have Stefano Caselli, his wife and other two colleagues in Bocconi, we are very good guys, but cross your finger, we are completely unuseful for you, okay? You don't pay so much, you don't pay, just 2 or 3 bottles of good wines, and that's enough. But network lobbying, no, is not relevant. It's up to you. It's written in the internal code of activity, the manifesto that I use to promote my activity, okay? I can say, dear guys, the advisory company is McKinsey, and in the technical committee I have Bill Clinton and Bill Gates. That's great. Or I can say the advisory company is a Pinco Pallo boutique of consulting, I don't know him, and in technical committee, the daughter of Stefano Caselli, 8 years old. Oh, you don't spend so much, but no effectiveness in terms of support of advisory company and technical committee.
So it's the investors that have the final say on the decision of the advisory committee?
No, they have to say yes or not. Investors don't decide anything. Please remember, you have to say, yes, I invest, because I like the project of Stefano and Daniele, or you have to say, dear Stefano and Daniele, I don't like it, and I don't invest. So what is quite tricky is that a relevant condition for the success of fundraising is that Stefano and Daniele must be so smart that we understand in advance the feeling of our potential audience, and we design an internal code of activity that probably match perfectly your wishes. You understand? We are very stupid if we go out in the market, we have our idea of technical committee and advisory company, and we didn't check before what are your wishes, what are your feels, what are your ideas. We are very stupid, because in this case we commit a suicide. Because we go out in the market and you say, but you are crazy. With this technical committee advisory company, no, we don't invest. You understand? But when you say yes, you said yes. Okay? Last, the custodian bank, a very trivial job, but also useful, because in the closed-end fund we have a lot of money, we have to use a deposit. And we have to deposit this money in a custodian bank. Take care, because it's not so marginal, the decision of a custodian bank, because if you put cash 1 billion euros in a bank, it's quite relevant to negotiate the interest rate on the deposit that the custodian bank gives to you. They are not peanuts, you understand? Because 5% of 1 billion euros, please calculate it per year, okay? 50 million euros, right? So it's quite important to identify the custodian bank, not simply for the job, but because of the results, okay? So the problem now is tremendous, because we have a lot of people that would like to eat and to have revenues. You see? You have to pay a lot of people. We have to pay investors because they want to have internal rate of return. Great. We want to pay Stefano and Daniele because we work a lot. We have to pay the advisory company. We have to pay the technical committee. We have to pay a lot of people. So we have to understand how it's possible to do that. Okay? And to understand how it's possible, you have to start from the engine of revenues, where the engine of revenues is the closed-end fund. So I want that we highlight what are the revenues and the costs that we can have in a closed-end fund. Revenues and costs. Let's start from the revenues. What are the revenues for the closed-end fund? Revenues. Guys, the revenues of the closed-end fund, first of all, capital gains. Okay? Second, you mentioned is not so important, but dividends. Why is not so important? Because if you invest in a company for private equity, you want to have capital gains. So it's very hard that the company give dividends because you want to increase the value of the company. Last, you mentioned interest on deposits. In many cases, interest on deposit is higher than dividends. Is it okay? These are the revenues that a closed-end fund has to generate, and the core of revenues is capital gain. So Stefano and Daniele work 24 hours per day because of capital gain, okay? But on the contrary, with the costs, we have to provide money to all the other players, okay? So we have to understand what are costs. We have 3 different costs. The cost number 1, we have to cross our finger, but we have losses. Okay? We have also other 2 costs, and the other 2 costs are the tool we use to pay all the players we find in the whiteboard, and the 2 costs are management fee and carried interest. Management fee and carried interest. I don't want to be very trivial, but the reason why we stay one semester in this classroom to discuss about private equity is related to this, okay? Seriously, carried interest, okay? If we don't have carried interest, it's a nonsense to create a course of private equity venture capital. And it's unuseful to have private equity and venture capital in the world. So let's start with management fee. What is management fee? Management fee is a fixed fee the closed-end fund has to pay to the asset management company every year. The average management fee nowadays in Europe is 2.5%. That means if the closed-end fund has the average size of 200 million euros, that means every year the closed-end fund gives to the asset management company 5 million euros. Okay? And what is the usage of this money for the asset management company, guys? What is the usage? Stefano and Daniele receive every year for 10 years 5 million euros. Okay? Are we happy? It's enough in your opinion? What we have to do with 5 million euros per year? First of all, we have to pay the advisory company. Generally, advisory company want to have a percentage of management fee. The typical percentage is the 30%. Okay? So we take 5 million euros from the closed-end funds, and we have to give 1.5 million to the advisory company. The most famous is the advisory company. The higher is the percentage the advisory company wants. Because if the name of the advisory company is McKinsey, McKinsey says, dear Stefano and Claudio, try to understand. You develop a lot of business because you spend the name of McKinsey. Please, you have to pay. Okay? Second, we have to pay the technical committee. Right? If I have Bill Gates, I have to pay Bill Gates for the 3 meetings we organize in Milan at the Four Seasons Hotel. Okay? 3 meetings per year. You have to pay business class flights for Bill Gates and his wife for 3 nights. Generally, American people would come to Italy would like to have this kind of package for 3 meetings per year. It's okay? Yes, it's okay, because you take a lot of benefits from the name of Bill Gates belonging to the technical committee. It's enough for Stefano and Claudio, 5 million. Okay, we don't have yet 5 million euros, but we have a 5 million minus the expenses for the advisory company, minus the salary for the technical committee, minus the payment of the fixed cost, because probably you have to pay installment for a flat in Milan. You have to pay 2 or 3 or 4 analysts working with us. You have to pay a lot of travel expenses because we travel a lot. At the very end of the day, we receive 5 million euros in our pockets. Considering also taxation, probably we have 50,000 euros. I think this is the result. This is not a problem for Stefano and Claudio, it's a problem for you investors. Because every time in fundraising you decide to invest in a closed-end fund, your problem is to calculate carefully the management fee. Not because for you it's important to reduce the amount of the management fee. No. Because you give us your money for 10 years, for you it's important to know if the management fee is enough to survive for 10 years. Grazie. Okay? So your problem as investor is not to verify if the management fee is cheap or not. No. Your problem is to say, okay, with 5 million of euros, Stefano and Claudio are able to manage their job for 10 years. This is your problem. And it's a classical item you have to evaluate in fundraising. That's the reason why, if you reduce the size of the closed-end fund, it's a nonsense. For what reason? Because the asset management company has no money to work. If you launch a closed-end fund of 25 million euros, very common in Italy, okay, and the management fee is the 2%, what does it mean? With 0.5 million per year, Stefano and Claudio has to pay the advisory company, the technical committee, our analyst, the installment for a flat, the fuel for the cars, and we don't have money yet. Is it a good idea for you to invest in this kind of closed-end fund? No. So a fundamental variable when investors identify the closed-end fund is the analysis of the management fee, where the game is not the cheapest, the best, but the game is, let's calculate if the management fee is fair, is enough, in order that the asset management company is able to develop properly the job. Okay? The biggest is the fund, the lower relevant is the problem, because with a mega fund of 10 billion euros, no problem of management fee. We can fix 1%, we are very happy. But if the size is lower, is a problem. Okay? Okay, guys? In your opinion, Stefano and Claudio work for 10 years for the management fee? No, they work 10 years. Okay, management fee is important to have a salary, but it's not an incentive. Okay? We work every hour of our week for another reason, and the other reason is exactly the same of investor, and the other reason is the carried interest. The driver, the incentive for the asset management company to work is not because we want to manage your money, but because we want to have the carried interest. What is the carried interest? The carried interest is the final prize, is the final surprise, is the big benefit. What is the approach of carried interest? The approach of carried interest is very simple. If the asset management company is able to get over a certain level of internal rate of return, the asset management company wants to have a percentage. Okay? So if we're able to get to an internal rate of return which is higher than a certain threshold, we want to have a percentage of it. So let's write the formula of carried interest. Carried interest is equal to percentage of the difference between final IRR and the so-called hurdle or floor IRR. Okay? So the carried interest is the percentage of the difference between the final IRR and the hurdle or floor IRR. Where the meaning is obvious, if the final IRR is higher than the hurdle rate, we put in our pocket a percentage. If the final IRR is lower than the hurdle rate, I'm very sorry, but Stefano and Claudio doesn't put anything in their pocket. Okay? The formula is stupid, but just 1 minute, please. The formula is stupid, but take care, because in the language of practitioner, there is a very strange usage of interest rates. Okay? Because the interest rates we use in this formula is not the yearly internal rate of return, but is the global internal rate of return. Okay? Where global, in order that you understand, if you invest 100, at the end we have 300 million, the global internal rate of return is 200%. So take care, because it's a conventional rule In this formula, we don't insert yearly internal rate of return, but we insert global internal rate of return. For what reason? No reason. It's a conventional rule, like in many stories in business. We have a lot of conventional rules. What is surprising, and I stop here but is important, what are the average percentage nowadays in Europe? The average percentage are 30%, a very big slice of a cake, and what is very, very surprising is the other rate, because more or less is 8%. Global. So if you invest 100 and after 10 years you have 108 millions, it's the minimum in order to have carried interest. So if you multiply the money of your investors, also the benefit for the asset management company, it's really incredible. It's really the incentive to work for 10 years to generate value. This is the driver, the carried interest. Okay? In some cases, if the advisory company is hungry, the advisory company can say, Stefano and Claudio, okay, you gave us a percentage of the management fee, but because you use the name of the advisory company, we want also a percentage of the carried interest. And there is generally a tremendous negotiation with the advisory company, okay? But it's another story, okay? So I think we can stop there. Next time we have to use a software in which we try to analyze where it's possible to find an equilibrium, a compromise between a very interesting carried interest for the asset management company and the final internal rate of return for investors. So we have to find a balance and equilibrium. So we'll see next week.